Picture this: you are the richest man in Rome, commanding 40,000 elite soldiers in the desert. Then your enemies parade your son's severed head on a spear, right in front of you. This is not fiction. This actually happened to Marcus Licinius Crassus in 53 BCE, and what followed changed the course of Western civilization forever. If you want to see how one moment of psychological warfare destroyed the Roman Republic, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because this story will blow your mind. Crassus was not just wealthy, he was worth $170 billion in today's money, but money could not buy him the one thing he desperately wanted: military glory to match Caesar and Pompey. So he launched an invasion of Parthia that would become Rome's most devastating defeat. But here is the twist that makes this story so brutal. It was not just a military disaster, it was a father watching his son die in the most horrific way possible, and that personal tragedy triggered the civil wars that destroyed the Roman Republic. This is the story of how greed, ambition, and a father's love collided in the Syrian desert to create one of history's most shocking military catastrophes. By the end, you will understand why this single moment changed everything. Marcus Crassus had everything except respect. While Caesar conquered Gaul and Pompey dominated the Mediterranean, Crassus was stuck being the banker of their three-man alliance. At 60 years old, this burned him up inside. The Parthian Empire looked like the perfect target: rich, distant, and supposedly weak, exactly what Crassus needed to prove he was more than just Rome's ATM. He convinced himself that conquering Parthia would bring both military glory and unimaginable wealth. Here is where it gets interesting: the Senate refused to declare war. They knew this was a bad idea, but Crassus did not care. He had enough money to fund his own private war. In 55 BCE, he showed up in Syria as governor and immediately started preparing for invasion. Would you risk everything for glory like Crassus did? Tell us in the comments what you think drives people to such extreme ambition. Crassus assembled a massive force: 7 full legions, 4,000 cavalry, and 4,000 light infantry, nearly 50,000 men total. Among his officers was his beloved son, Publius, a proven warrior who had served with Caesar in Gaul. Having his son there made this personal for Crassus. This was not just about glory anymore, it was about building a family legacy, but Crassus had no idea what he was walking into. The Parthians were not the easy target he imagined. They were about to teach Rome a lesson in warfare that would echo through history. Spring 53 BC, Crassus crossed the Euphrates with his massive army, confident this would be easy. Early battles went exactly as planned. Local cities surrendered, resistance crumbled, and the flat desert seemed perfect for Roman heavy infantry. But this was all part of the trap. General Surena, the young Parthian commander, was playing chess while Crassus was playing checkers. Every victory was actually drawing the Romans deeper into the desert, away from their supply lines, into terrain that favored Parthian cavalry over Roman infantry. The Parthians were not like other enemies Rome had faced. They did not fight fair, they fought smart. Their army was built around speed and psychological warfare, heavy cataphracts for shock attacks, and horse archers who could hit you from distances Roman weapons could not reach. The Parthian tactics were centuries ahead of their time. What do you think? Were they military geniuses or just lucky? Drop your thoughts below. As the Romans pushed deeper into Mesopotamia, the psychological pressure mounted. Parthian scouts would appear on ridges, just visible enough to keep Roman soldiers on edge, then vanish. Supply convoys came under attack from invisible enemies. Sleep became impossible as strange sounds echoed through the night. Crassus finally decided to make his stand at Carrhae, a small city that seemed to offer tactical advantages, but he had no idea he was walking into the most sophisticated military trap in ancient history. June 9, 53 BCE, the Battle of Carrhae began at dawn. Crassus arranged his forces in traditional Roman formation, heavy infantry in the center, cavalry on the wings. His son, Publius, commanded the right wing. Everything looked perfect in the morning light. Then the Parthians appeared, and the Romans realized they were facing something completely new. Instead of a traditional army, they saw a purely cavalry force moving like a single organism across the desert, heavy cataphracts in gleaming armor surrounded by thousands of horse archers flowing like water. The battle opened with an arrow storm that darkened the sky, but here is what made it terrifying: the arrows never stopped coming. The Parthians had organized supply trains with thousands of fresh arrows, keeping their archers constantly supplied. Roman shields, designed for spears and swords, could not handle this sustained bombardment. Young Publius saw what looked like a Parthian retreat and made the decision that would doom him. He broke formation and charged with his cavalry, playing directly into Surena's trap. The heavy cataphracts absorbed his charge, while horse archers surrounded his force. Cut off from the main army, surrounded by enemies striking from all sides, Publius's force was systematically destroyed. The young commander fought with desperate courage, but the outcome was inevitable. Facing capture and torture, Publius made his final choice. He ordered one of his men to kill him rather than be taken alive. But the Parthians had other plans for his body. What they did next would break his father's heart and shatter the morale of an entire army. The Parthians understood something that most ancient armies did not: psychological warfare could be more devastating than physical violence. Their treatment of captured Romans was not random brutality, it was calculated terror designed to break enemy morale. Captured Roman soldiers faced horrific fates designed to maximize both suffering and psychological impact. Some were flayed alive, while their screams carried across the desert to demoralize their comrades. Others were buried up to their necks and used for archery practice. The Parthians had perfected keeping victims alive for extended periods, while inflicting maximum pain. But perhaps most psychologically devastating was forcing captured Romans to fight each other to the death. Wounded legionaries who had fought side by side were given crude weapons, and told the survivor would get a quick death. These gladiatorial contests in the desert sand broke the bonds of military brotherhood that held Roman units together. The Parthians also used water torture, giving captured Romans just enough water to survive, while forcing them to watch comrades die of thirst in the desert heat. This created internal conflicts that destroyed military discipline. These psychological warfare tactics were incredibly advanced for their time. Subscribe if you want to see more videos about ancient military innovations. But all of these calculated cruelties were just preparation for Surena's masterpiece of psychological warfare. He had something special planned for Publius Crassus's body, something that would turn a military defeat into a personal catastrophe that would haunt Rome for generations. The young Roman's death was about to become the centerpiece of a psychological assault so devastating that it would shatter not just his father's sanity, but the spirit of an entire empire. Then came the moment that would define the Battle of Carrhae forever. Parthian warriors approached the Roman lines carrying a spear topped with Publius Crassus's severed head. The psychological impact was immediate and catastrophic. Surena had timed this perfectly. The Roman army was already demoralized by hours of constant arrows and, watching Publius's cavalry get destroyed, now they witnessed something that broke the legendary Roman discipline: their general's complete psychological collapse. The Parthians did not just display the head, they paraded it slowly along the Roman battle line, ensuring every soldier could see their commander's son. Then, they began chanting in Latin, words learned from captured Romans, describing in graphic detail how Publius had died. Marcus Crassus, Rome's richest and most powerful man, was reduced to a broken father staring at his son's lifeless face. Contemporary accounts describe him as unable to speak or give orders for several minutes. His staff had to physically support him to prevent collapse. This moment changed everything. Can you imagine watching your own child die like this? Share your thoughts on how personal tragedy shapes history. The sight of their general's breakdown had a cascading effect. Centurions who had maintained discipline through decades of warfare found their men beginning to panic. The legendary Roman military machine was disintegrating before the enemy's eyes. Roman soldiers who survived Carrhae would carry this memory forever. The image of their invincible general reduced to a sobbing father became a symbol of Rome's vulnerability and the personal cost of imperial ambition. As night fell, Crassus attempted to organize a retreat, but his army was no longer a disciplined force. The psychological trauma had shattered the bonds holding Roman units together. The retreat became a massacre as Parthian cavalry pursued fleeing Romans through the darkness. The final act came when Surena offered truce negotiations. Desperate to save what remained of his army, the broken Crassus agreed to meet, but this was one last trap. During the negotiations, violence erupted and Crassus was killed. Some sources claim molten gold was poured down his throat to mock his legendary greed. The numbers tell the story of complete disaster of 42,000 Roman troops, 20,000 were killed, 10,000 captured, and only 10,000 escaped. 7 entire legions destroyed, along with their sacred eagles. It was Rome's worst military defeat since Hannibal. But the real damage was political. Crassus's death ended the first triumvirate, the alliance that had kept peace between Rome's most powerful men. Without his wealth and influence balancing their ambitions, Caesar and Pompey became direct rivals. The civil wars that destroyed the Republic can be traced directly to that moment when Publius's severed head broke his father's spirit. The psychological warfare that defeated Rome's army had consequences that would reshape Western civilization. The severed head of Publius Crassus became more than a symbol of defeat, it became the catalyst that transformed the Roman world. The psychological trauma inflicted on his father had consequences that echo through history. The Battle of Carrhae shattered the myth of Roman invincibility. For the first time, a Roman army was completely destroyed, not through superior numbers, but through superior tactics and psychological warfare. The lesson was clear: Rome could be defeated by enemies who understood Roman weaknesses. Modern military historians study Carrhae as an early example of asymmetric warfare, smaller, mobile forces defeating larger traditional armies through superior tactics. The Parthian use of mobility, ranged weapons, and psychological operations influenced military thinking for centuries. These ancient tactics are still studied by modern militaries. What do you think today's armies could learn from the Parthians? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe if you want more videos about historical battles. The story of Crassus reminds us that behind every great historical event are individual human stories of loss and broken dreams. The severed head that broke Rome was not just a military trophy, it was a son, a father's pride, and a symbol of how quickly triumph turns to tragedy. In the end, Carrhae teaches us that the greatest victories and defeats are decided not by weapons or numbers, but by the human spirit. When Surena displayed Publius's head, he did not just win a battle, he broke the psychological foundation of Roman power and set in motion events that transformed the ancient world. The desert sands have long covered the bones of those who died at Carrhae, but the lesson remains: ambition without wisdom, power without restraint, and the pursuit of glory at any cost can lead to consequences more terrible than any defeat. The severed head that broke Rome continues to remind us that in war, as in life, the greatest casualties are often not those who die, but those who must live with what they have lost.